Hey, we're live. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining me on this midweek Facebook Live. I'm joined here by State Representative Brad Halbrook. We're coming to you with a little bit of a longer form, and we're going to cover the energy hearing that the Illinois Senate hosted on Monday. There are a lot of clips that we have to play. We think this is a really important discussion for people to understand. And Brad, why don't you just tell the folks how this came to be, this energy hearing?
Well, thanks, Jeannie. And yeah, the long story short, it was back in April when Ameren announced their rate increases for the summer months. Early May, myself and Republican colleagues of the House Energy Committee called for joint committee hearings between the House and Senate Energy Committees to bring in the experts to have a subject matter hearing on the future of energy, the current situation, how it was going to impact consumers. And so we called for that, and it just kind of fell on deaf ears. Fast forward to a week ago, this hearing got posted and was held by the Senate on Monday afternoon at 2 o'clock.
Yep. So this is a hearing again that you guys took the initiative to call for, and facing extremely high energy bills. Finally, the Illinois Senate has come together, and they brought forward an incredible panel of experts. Some of them not credible, quite frankly, in my opinion. So you can take incredible either way that you want to. But in this particular process, we had to argue for, and fortunately, Terry Bryant was able to get the one person. We asked for one person to be added to this panel, and of course it's somebody that people will be familiar with if they follow our work on Breakthrough Ideas, if they follow my radio show, and that is Steve Gorham. Steve Gorham is an Illinois resident. He graduated from the University of Illinois. He's the executive director for the Climate Science Coalition of America and author of 4 books on energy, climate change, and sustainable development and public policy. And we had to argue to get him on. Now, a big part of the discussion, of course, had to do with the capacity market, why prices are high. You'll find out, hey, you'll have to listen to this whole presentation, but you're going to find out how much Ameren has to actually import to service its customers in central and southern Illinois. I think you'll find that fact interesting. But the bottom line is this discussion was a lot about CEJA, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. And there's no greater, I think, bottom line upfront summary on this than this 1 minute and 15-second clip that I'm going to play for listeners right now. So if you don't want to hear the whole discussion between Brad and I, Steve Gorham basically put the entire discussion into context with this one clip. Really important that you pay attention. And by the way, it was a 3-hour hearing, and they made Steve wait till the very end before they took any testimony for him. And he held on and he did it. Super professional. And this clip, I think, tells you exactly where we are with this entire CEJA Act and where it's led. So I want you to take a listen. You're going to hear first Steve Stadelman responds to a back and forth with Steve Gorham after he gave his opening statement. I'll play his opening statement following this, but we're going to listen to what he says about Tesla, because this is your summary. Take a listen. Okay, we're going to add him to the stage. We're going to add that. Hold on here. Let's go. Here we go. Take a listen.
Emissions. Many other countries are taking advantage of the growth in jobs and economic development with clean power, clean energy sources and generation. Are we missing that opportunity if we don't continue down this path?
Well, that's an interesting comment, but I guess you can always fund jobs to do something, but if it raises everybody's power prices, I don't think that's very smart. Let me give you
Wait, did you catch that? I guess you can always fund something to get jobs if that's what you're after. That's what they're after here. They're after jobs. Keep listening.
Another example, Tesla, Elon Musk's Tesla is a leading provider of solar systems and grid scale batteries. But they just built the Colossus XAI supercomputer facility in Memphis, Tennessee, and they put in 35 on-site gas turbines to power it. They didn't use solar and they didn't use batteries. And Colossus has been built and expanded to 200,000 graphics processing units. It was built in only 6 months. They didn't even have permits for it. They now have the permits. But this is an example of what is going on around the country. So what you do with solar in Illinois is really going to have zero effect. Unless it's just a jobs program, that's fine. But it's probably going to raise your power rates.
Okay. So Brad, unless it's just a jobs program, is that what we're talking about with CEJA?
Well, it may be because it's the Climate Equitable Jobs Act. It's in the title, and there's a tremendous amount of funding to go to different job training programs. And so those two things have happened. It has, in an attempt to put some jobs together, but then it has raised prices too. So Mr. Gorham hits the nail on the head in this clip, in that answer to the senator.
Yeah, and I thought it was also interesting. He points out that Tesla is a maker of grid scale batteries and also solar solar panels and mechanicians, right? They do all that.
Right.
And they are not using solar to fund their mega data center in Tennessee. Oh, by the way, it's not in Illinois. They're using 35 gas powered turbines.
Yeah, I just think that's just stunning. I mean, again, Steve Gorham hits the nail on the head here. What Tesla's doing. I think it's very intuitive of what the real world's like. Not in the Pritzker climate fantasy world. This is
Yeah, it's in Tennessee, right to work state. It's in Tennessee where permitting is not as bureaucratic as it is here. It's in Tennessee where within 6 months he put this entire colossal plant together. It's in Tennessee where he is using gas-fired plants because he knows that they won't be shut down in 10 years. And by the way, I hope people are paying attention in Illinois, but I don't think so.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I have another clip here. This is T. Dickey. He is somebody who actually is in the solar industry. He puts in rooftop solar and I think some level of commercial as well. And I want you to listen carefully because, again, it tells you what solar is really all about. All right, let's add him to the stage.
Iconic Energy Solar Professionals in Rockford, Illinois. Install solar for homes and businesses and farmers throughout northern Illinois. We've installed over 2,000 systems, small as a doghouse, as large as a solar farm. And all of our customers, not one, but all of them have been dependent on the federal 30% tax credit that has been in place for over 20 years. It makes a substantial impact in the return on investment. Also, with the rising energy costs, solar becomes more viable, or at least they're looking for alternative energy options. But the loss of the tax credit for residential customers and the extremely accelerated deterioration of the commercial federal 30% tax credit had caused immediate fear and worry throughout all of our potential prospective customers, but made a lot of them pause to the extent where we've had to date this year approximately 20% of our sales and revenue, homes and businesses not going solar. And I have also had to already immediately reduce staff to that same percentage.
So, Brad, what's the takeaway there?
Well, there's a couple things. And I think he started out with basically these projects are not viable without the tax credits. And I think that's so telling. All the comments back and forth on the different social media postings, the YouTube stuff that we put out, all the comments is, well, not all the comments, half the comments is, well, wind and solar is cheaper, right? It's the cheapest form of electricity. The problem is capturing it and transmitting it is not cheapest. It's not free, and it comes at a high cost. And again, we've said this for a long time. The only way this stuff works is with the federal tax credits or subsidies, whether it's coming from the state or from the feds. And so it fails the test. It just won't work without these taxpayer-funded subsidies.
Okay, that's exactly right. Now, they had another expert on that I thought was pretty informative, and that guy's name is Joe Bowring. He was with Monitoring Analytics, and they are a market monitoring agency strictly for PJM. And he got into the meat of things. He got into the heart of the matter, really, talking about capacity, the capacity market and whatnot. And so I want to play a clip there about him discussing that. And we'll get a little bit more react. Again, this is Joe Bowring.
Are a critical issue. And our simple proposal there is that data centers should be required to bring their own generation to meet their own need. Data centers have an impact on transmission costs. Data centers have an impact on capacity costs, and data centers have an impact on energy costs. And when I say impact, I'm talking billions of dollars, not just a trivial increase. The other option is to wait in queue until PJM can serve those resources reliably. But think about adding 5, 10, 15,000 megawatts of load when PJM is so tight that it's actually a couple hundred megawatts short. There's simply no immediate way in the immediate future to meet that load unless, in our view, those data centers are required to bring their own generation. And not to disagree with everyone who's spoken just on the last panel or two, but solar and batteries are not dispatchable and they cannot serve data center load.
Okay, well, that's pretty definitive. Solar and batteries are not dispatchable and they cannot serve data center load. He had a very long testimony, a back and forth about things. He mentioned that energy prices are up 60.2%. Capacity is up 78.5%, from $2.5 billion to $15 billion in cost. And that is all due to data centers. He said transmission's up 5%. He said long-term transmission is up more when you look over about a decade, but that's changing now to energy prices themselves rising quicker. He said that, again, he said that in that clip, PJM is short capacity right now of 200 megawatts. That he said that's not a lot, but it's a warning sign. Well, what do we know about data centers in the state of Illinois?
Well, there's a tremendous amount of data centers that are being built and considered or are already built and on the agenda to be built. I think this minute or minute and a half clip of his was just loaded with more truth, and a lot of people want to be able to handle the idea that PJM is maybe already short some energy. I think this idea that everybody's telling these data centers to bring their own power. What happens if it is a manufacturing facility? Are the officials going to tell these manufacturers to bring their own power? What's that going to be about, and how's that going to work? But I think as he closed out, the thing that was kind of most telling, and you touched on this right from the start of your your comment, was this idea that solar and battery is not reliable. It's not dispatchable. They need 5 nines, he called it, 99.999% reliability. And you'll only get that from coal. And he didn't say coal, natural gas, or nuclear, but that's the dispatchable energy that he was alluding to. And I think that's very telling as he closed out his testimony in that clip.
Yeah, no, good point. He did. He said, you need darn near 100% reliability to run a data center. Now, a lot of people think that, well, PJM has a lot of capacity, a lot of supply. Illinois is certainly and he mentioned this in his comments, although I did not pull the clip. He did mention that Illinois is a net exporter of energy. That's not necessarily true in Ameren. And I want you people to listen to this. Like, Ameren probably geographically provides probably 2/3 of the energy to Illinois. PJM takes up kind of that northeast corner for the most part, where predominantly the population is, but Ameren territory is very large and vast. And when we look at the power, because we have to deal with 2 grid operators, we need to be concerned about both. Ameren prices have spiked tremendously, much more than PJM, because PJM has automatic governors on the pricing right now, but that can all change. This is Matt Tomek. He's with Ameren, and here's what he had to say about their power supply. And you'll have to listen carefully, audience, to what he says, and then Brad and I will weigh in in case you missed some of the salient points he makes.
Illinois.
Oops.
I talked to my team the other day. 80% of our power needs are met through importation into our zone at this point in time. And I think Senator, a lot of that is driven, by retirements of facilities that we've seen in recent years, a lot of older generating units, fossil fuel predominantly, downstate Southern Illinois, was a coal producing part of the country, right? And so as those plants have retired, you've seen a gap emerge and some tight supply situation emerge. Now, investments made to the transmission system.
Okay, so Brad, again, what should have people picked up on that they may have missed in that clip?
Yeah, so I think that right off the start, the 80% importation. Jeannie, we talked about this 4 years ago in the summer of 2021 while CEJA was being debated. They didn't get it past that spring. We went on an energy tour and we predicted that rates would go up, that facilities would close, we would lose jobs, we would import less clean energy into the state of Illinois. And all that's happened, and he's just confirmed that now. 4 years later, he confirmed that we're importing 80% of the energy into the Ameren area. And so I think that's a huge disservice. I think the other party talked about, these premature closing of these coal-fired plants in central and southern Illinois. We're sitting, I mean, there's coal plants 45 minutes from my home, about any direction you want to go, I guess west and south and southeast. There's coal-fired facilities that if they haven't been shut down, they will be shut down within the next year. And, of course, the government or the governor and other officials say, well, they're just not equally, it's an economic decision. They've chose not to continue to remain in business. Well, there's been all these air quality standards that have been put on these facilities over the last 3 and 4 decades. There's always ongoing maintenance that you have to continue to upgrade and do different things to keep them operational. Sometimes there's, in a year's time or 2 years' time, there's heavier amounts of maintenance that has to be done. And so when the writing's on the wall that the closures are coming because of legislation, they're just going to quit putting money into them and just ultimately shut them down, whether it's on the schedule that's legislated or otherwise. And it has taken several thousand megawatts of power offline. And that's what's put us into this tight spot.
Okay, so on that note, this was actually addressed by Sue Resin in a question to Joe Boring. I'm going to play that, and then I want to also tell you what IMA says afterwards. But we're first going to play this Joe Boring clip. Listen carefully.
Former Leader Cunningham's question, talking about, or he asked you the question about having capacity go offline, meaning plants that decide not to invest because of bills that we currently have on the books or messages that we are sending in the state of Illinois. Do you feel that having the companies not make the investment in the state of Illinois because we have bills pending that send negative messages to them is a factor as to why the natural gas plants are going offline, or they choose not to invest in their upkeep?
Right. So it's certainly the case that some natural gas plants in Illinois have decided to retire and to leave the state, literally physically leave the state recently, as a result of the rules that they face on environmental limitations. I can't speak to more generally the level of investment in power plants in Illinois, but we certainly have seen the issue where some units are leaving.
Yeah, there you go. We've definitely seen an issue with units leaving, and it doesn't have to be that way. Brad, right. You know what? Mark Denzler really summed up things very, very well. I'm going to go first to a little bit of a longer summary. Mark Denzler represents the Illinois Manufacturers Association. They're the largest association that represents that particular industry. And I didn't pull this part of clip, but I think they have something like 650,000 people working in the manufacturing area. And so they have a huge footprint when it comes to the electrical grid and their usage. So listen carefully to this. There's a lot of nuggets. He goes by it very fast, but if you listen carefully, you'll figure out where he's going. And then we're going to tell you what he says we should be doing, because CEJA does have a way out of all of this if the legislature would act. Okay, let's listen to this first.
More per month, and the impact that has on them, hiring new people, investing in their companies.
Let's start
just
back
like
at the beginning.
Ratepayers and Ameren paying, $40 or $50 more a month, or ComEd 10 or 15. You can imagine what my members are paying: tens of thousands and millions of dollars more per month and the impact that that has on them, hiring new people, investing in their companies. Just like Illinois families, businesses rely on safe, reliable, and affordable energy. I would say the best economic development act that Illinois has taken in 40 years was deregulation back in 1997. But slowly we've kind of re-regulated the market. State policy, in some cases federal policy, that requires the purchase of certain energy regardless of cost. We believe we need a competitive market and an all of the above approach. As you've heard other people say today, we're kind of at a tipping point on energy. It's not unique to Illinois. It's across the United States, and quite frankly, it's across the world. After a relatively flat period of energy usage, as you've heard others say, demand has grown significantly because of things like data centers and AI and quantum and increased manufacturing. And Econ 101 tells you when there's high demand and low supply, costs increase. I was at a conference with Constellation last fall, and one of the facts they pointed out is the last 2 years, we put an energy user the size of Japan on the global marketplace each of the last 2 years when you think about that. We had concerns when CEJA passed a couple years ago about the forced closure of baseload generation like clean coal and gas and cogeneration at a date certain when we didn't think that we had the backup in place, the renewable energy or other things to ensure a smooth transition for a cleaner future. And unfortunately today, businesses and families are paying significantly high. I'm not going
to. Okay. All right. A lot of there to unpack. The best thing we did was in 97, deregulate the market. We have since re-regulated the market. One of the most harmful things is we have put in what he said, forced purchase of particular forms of energy. That would be the renewable portfolio standard that requires a certain amount of renewable energy and then funds it using your tax dollars to subsidize renewables. He talked about the need for a competitive market. He talked about all of the above. So they're not opposed to solar. They just want all the above. He talked about they had concerns about CEJA. They did. They slipped in opposition to the CEJA back then. And when he talks about a date certain to shut these down, in another clip, and I'll play that clip shortly, he calls that a political date. Brad?
Well, exactly. And he alluded to that about the forced closure. Didn't think we had a plan in place or a backup in place to fulfill the gap. And again, that is playing out in real time right before our very eyes. So he's dead on.
Yeah, so he had a solution, which was great because he pointed out some stuff that I think most people were unaware of, and maybe even some of the folks on this panel were unaware of the fact that there is an out in CEJA. And so let's take a listen to that.
And to be quickly about it, number one, the CEJA legislation had a clause in there allowing current facilities to continue operating as opposed to these politically set deadlines. We think that sending a message to the market and using that to say we haven't built the renewables, we don't have the infrastructure, sending a message to the market that these plants can continue operating while we move through that transition is important. Secondly, the IMA introduced legislation last year. Senator Resin, Representative Vela, about getting rid of the nuclear moratorium. We're one of only 12 states that still have a moratorium. We obviously allow small modular nuclear right now.
So, Brad, is the fact that this is a politically set date and that CEJA allows for an out if the transition to renewables is not ready, has that been talked about at all in your caucus or on the House floor?
Yeah, absolutely not. And I think this revelation and in all of this discussion, when he said that Monday about these facilities to continue in place, nobody has talked about that. Now, I've got a video in process that if it's not out, will be out soon, talking about the safety valve that New York has in their climate legislation that legislators or panelists of a certain energy committee can request hearings if they're not meeting their goals that was set in that New York climate legislation. They can put the whoa, or they can kind of realign the timeline to adjust. Okay, it doesn't change the law, but it adjusts the timeline. And so it's a safety valve, if you will. I would kind of compare that to this, but we don't know what the mechanism is to do that. So I think this is going to require further investigation to see what it is. I'm just curious why nobody's talking about it.
Yeah, no, I thought it was very important that he brought that up. And of course, when you're looking at thousands of pages in a bill that gets slammed through, you just don't know all these nuances, but it's fortunate that he brought that up. Really important point. Now,
and Jeannie, one thing before we move on, there is a process in place to where the grid operator can go to IEPA and ask for the emission standards of the natural gas plants to be relaxed. Okay, they can do that on a month-by-month basis. We've talked about that since we've known about that safety valve, if you would, for a long time. But again, I don't know that has happened yet in the 4 years that Siege has been in place, or just short 4 years. So there is a way to do that. And I think in all of this 3-hour testimony, all the discussion we've had is none of the 3-hour testimony, for the most part, grants any immediate relief to consumers. I think relaxing those emission standards that's been politically put in place on the natural gas plants would grant some immediate relief. It would put additional power on the grid, hopefully alleviating some pressure. But nobody seems to be talking about that.
So, just briefly pausing here for a minute before I show a couple more clips that I have teed up. I thought the hearing, for the most part, was essentially proving up the progressive environmental cause for renewable energy. That was their attempt to do it. I actually think that they failed for the most part, though, because while they had people that are only looking at jobs and essentially saying, look, if I don't have a 30% tax credit, then my business model doesn't work in the private sector. Well, I'm sorry, but if your business model depends on a government tax credit, you're not a private business anymore. I mean, seriously, you're a jobs program, just like Steve Gorham mentioned before. Is this a jobs program, or is this about energy? CJ is about jobs program more than anything.
Right.
And but they had those panelists. They had your environmental panelists. They had Cobb there, who's supposed to be sort of in the middle, but honestly, she said, the Cobb representative, Sarah Moskovitz, and I didn't pull the clip. People can watch all this stuff somewhere, somehow, if they want to. But she said renewable energy has no fuel cost. Well, that doesn't matter. That does not matter one bit. Anyway, that's not the whole thing. You have to look at the whole system. And by the way, they do have fuel cost because those windmills have additional power to them because they need to rotate those windmills if they haven't rotated, just to keep them upright.
Right.
So they have auxiliary power going to them. So what's the net of that? So she's wrong. Let's face it, that. But then they did have the PGM monitor in there. They had Ameren in there. They had a ComEd discussion too about transmission. Those people are sort of having to play it safe because they're regulated by the very people that are hosting the hearing. But they could have done a lot more, I think, in terms of digging into how much this solar and wind is costing us. And I thought that was a misstep.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. Look, there were some other things because a lot of people wanted to point to the fact that, oh, hey, our savior is going to be solar and it's going to be grid battery storage. I pulled this from, this is Sarah Wakas. And let's see, I forgot who she's part of.
NRDC,
ACP, New Leaf Energy,
and the IPA.
Back this up, and you can listen to her. I'm going to have you listen to what she says about solar and grid storage, and that we have to go there. Take a very careful listen to this.
And study after study, Power Bureau, Gable and Associates, NRDC, ACP, and the IPA shows that storage saves Illinois ratepayers money. And I believe we've submitted all of those studies as part of our testimony. If we don't do this, if we don't do a storage program, Illinois will continue to pay high capacity prices, and that capacity money will go to out-of-state gas plants. So that's our choice. If we choose an Illinois storage program, not only will Illinois ratepayers save money by lowering capacity prices, they may even get a credit on their bill. The program is designed to mimic the carbon mitigation credit program, and that program has provided more credits to consumers than costs.
Okay, couple things there, Brad. One, she admitted if they can't do grid and batteries, then you're going to out-of-state gas plants. All right. Number two, she goes on to say that none of this makes sense without credits.
Right. It absolutely doesn't. And one of the senators quizzed her a little bit more about the battery storage, and this is an important discussion about. They always talk about 4-hour batteries, but nobody really ever talks about 24-hour storage and what happens when the wind quits blowing. And she said, well, at night when the sun quits shining, the batteries will just recharge off the grid. I mean, she said this. It's like, okay, and the senator pressed her and said, well, how is that? Well, it's powered from the grid. And she danced around it 2 or 3 times. And then she said, well, the wind blows all night long. Well,
yeah, none of that's true. It's powered from the grid using natural gas from out of state and coal plants sitting in Louisiana.
Right.
In the Ameren territory. This is nuts. But Steve Gorham had a really good summary of all of that about how solar and grid storage is not economical, is not competitive. And so everybody take a listen to Steve again. Here he goes.
Will raise power prices for Illinois residents. Wind and solar facilities use 100 times the land of coal, gas, or nuclear plants for the same average power output. Because wind and solar are spread over wide areas, they require 2 or 3 times as much transmission to be constructed. Because of intermittency and transmission needs, deployment of wind and solar increases the cost of power. European nations that have built the most wind and solar suffer the highest electricity prices. Denmark and Germany have the highest wind turbine density in the world, but their electricity prices are 3 times the United States price. Commercial scale grid batteries are very expensive. According to the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, batteries to back up intermittent wind and solar systems for just 24 hours cost 10 times as much as the renewable system itself. In summary, Illinois net zero policies, if somehow achieved, will not provide a significant emissions benefit, but these policies will raise power prices and use vast amounts of land for systems and transmission. Rising power prices will hurt residents and businesses and cause industry to select other states for investment for no tangible environmental benefit.
Yeah, so there you go. It's what takes 100 times the space for a solar system than if you had a coal or a nuclear plant. Brad, I don't know. I know you listened to the entire presentation as well. I believe that they rattle off a handful of states that have actually even more data storage going to them than the state of Illinois. And here we've got Governor Pritzker touting his prowess in attracting those very industries to the state. It's not true.
Right. Well, again, Steve continues to give out more truth than a lot of people can handle. I think, if the solar and wind installations are not viable without the 30% tax credit, and then the answer to the problem is battery storage, that's 100 times more expensive than the original installation. How does that all pencil out? And back to the female speaker panelist earlier that you just played, it's like, well, okay, if we do all this stuff, it will make the cost cheaper for consumers. But yet then Mr. Gorham contradicts that and say, look, here's the facts. In all these European countries, I think we could probably almost point to California and some other states, everywhere they've relied heavily on the alternative energies, their costs are 2 and 3 times higher.
Yeah, it was also mentioned, and I forgot whose testimony it was. It might have been the Ameren guy, that Texas has the most wind out of any other state, and they're adding gas plants, and their gas plants will have 3 times the capacity that they currently have in the wind that they're adding. I mean, so the other states know what works for them and which is most economical. Do we think that Texas is dumb when it comes to the economy? I don't think so.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. And again, I think the point that Mr. Densler made about deregulation in '97, and now the Illinois General Assembly is re-regulating the energy industry, the electrical industry. And I think that's a thing that we kind of overlook. We've not talked about, hey, I thought we deregulated once, and now all of a sudden we're regulating it back into existence. We're regulating people to tell them what they can use and what they can't use. And I think this is very, very telling about the future where we're at. And I think this is a huge wake-up call. This hearing hopefully will get some people's attention.
Okay, well, I'm just going to close it out because Steve Moore's Unleash Prosperity newsletter or email this morning had this today. Wake up, America. We are nearing an electric grid blackout disaster. And he says, and here's the headline, America's power grid is no match for the AI data center boom. And then he goes, how do we avert the crisis? He had 6 things: remove all Biden era obstacles for drilling for natural gas, the cleanest and most efficient power source, stop shutting down efficient and low cost clean coal plants, greenlight the building of nuclear plants, protect and expand the reliability of electric grid system immediately, and renewable energy mandates in many states that disrupt the grid system and double power costs. And number 6, build pipelines and LNG terminals to safely transport gas throughout the country and the world. Mm-hmm. So that was just from today.
Yeah, and I think that's a great piece, and I think it's a short summary. And again, that's a great daily newsletter that comes out, and he hits the nail on the head there on that one.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me today, Brad. I know we disrupted your day to do this, but I thought it was really important to take this time now while it's still fresh in our memories after watching 3 hours of that testimony to go ahead and tell the rest of the people what's going on about energy in the state of Illinois.
Well, this is an important subject, and without a doubt, this is time well spent. We need to talk about this more. Again, I met with a constituent this morning. He showed me his power bill. The kilowatt hour rate went up 35%. You know, whether it's a home that's went up $50, $75 or $100 a month, a farming operation has maybe went up $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, a small business $1,000 or more dollars a month compared to a year ago. All these things are driving cost up, giving consumers, homeowners, farmers, business people less choice to do with their profits, and squeezing what profit margins they may have. And so we're already beginning to see in Central Illinois, I'm hearing of some small businesses, some restaurants that are beginning to close because the power bills is just putting too much of a squeeze on them.
Okay, well, to be continued. We'll be watching carefully and hope that you are too. Thanks so much for joining me again. And that's going to end our live.
Thank you.